Monsters. Written by Brian Hartman. Narrated by Brian Hartman. The prompt is, "Monsters aren't real," his dad said. When I was at Bobby's house, his dad told me that monsters aren't real. Oh, they're real, all right. There are little tiny monsters that use litter boxes and hack up hairballs. Then there's medium-sized monsters that go to school 5 days a week and refuse to clean their room. Charlie giggled and pulled his arms back, fingers flexed and stiff as if to deploy imaginary claws. Then there's large monsters. Those are the tricky ones because they're hard to spot. They don't look like monsters, and often you don't know who they are until it's too late. Charlie looked at his claws and lowered his hands, realizing the futility of his weapons. Then how could we stop the large monsters? I kneeled down and wrapped my arm around him. Want to know a secret about them? They may be bigger than you, but they're not very tough. Their power comes from making people afraid. Do you know why he told you monsters aren't real? Charlie shook his head. Because he doesn't want you to know that he is one. That makes sense. Kenny tells me about some things his dad does to his mom. If anyone is a monster, it's him. Doug sat silently for a moment and reflected on the words. He'd known Beverly since high school. She was quite a woman back then, cheerleader, track star, and even did well in her studies. She exuded happiness and confidence. They ran into each other at a coffee shop a week ago and used the time to catch up. The conversation had quickly become a therapy session. She met Matt in college and fell for him instantly. He was on the pre-med pathway and wanted to be a pediatric surgeon. Charlie came along at an inappropriate time, right at the start of clinical rotations, when spare time was just a fantasy. Matt's training responsibilities and desire to match a competitive surgical specialty meant he was rarely at home with his wife and new child. Beverly resented his absence, and he resented her lack of appreciation for what he was accomplishing. Residency widened the gap in their relationship, and she sought emotional refuge in something that seemed foolproof, 80-proof to be exact. Her drinking dulled both the emotional and physical wounds that Matt created in her life. She had stopped caring about the nights he didn't come home from the hospital. Originally, it was because of a heavy caseload, but now it was simply adultery. Every night he wasn't home meant one less night of abuse. She hoped whoever the new woman was, or man, fared better than her. Do you think you hurt Bobby? Asked Charlie. Doug snapped back to the present. Why would you ask that? Well, Bobby won't tell me what happened, and when I ask, he just cries. Doug could feel the anger rising inside. He stood up and began pacing the room, flexing his hands into fists. He inhaled deeply and exhaled through pursed lips. Charlie, I never answered your question. You want to know how to stop a large monster? He nodded, eyes open and focused. You become an extra large monster and smash him to pieces. Monsters only respect other monsters. Doug picked up Charlie and held him on his hip. Yes, I think Bobby's dad hurt his arm. And he's done some other things too. Remember, I told you not to start fights, but it's okay to end one? Yep, said Charlie. Well, it's time to go end one. When your mom wakes up, tell her I may need some bail money. Doug sat Charlie back down on the ground and pulled his arms back, flexing his fingers as if to expose imaginary claws. Charlie smiled and did the same. This has been Monsters. Written by Brian Hartman. Narrated by Brian Hartman.